Throughout our Valorant journey, we all have moments where we get lost in the monotonous grind, only to find ourselves queuing ranked on autopilot mode. It's quite easy to fall into this mental trap when you don't have specific goals for improvement to focus on. At the end of the day, the #1 way to climb up the ranks is by raising your overall win rate. This is done by having a solid foundation of good habits that can give you an advantage over your opponents. If any of you relate to what we just mentioned, here are 4 simple rules to follow that'll increase your win rate over the long term. I just wanted to highlight a few of the website subscribers who have made some massive improvements recently. Over at SkillCapped.com, we have tons of courses tailored specifically to helping players just like you improve. If you want to hear more, be sure to stick around till the end of the video. Before we head into the more in-depth tips, we'd like to start off with one of the simplest rules to follow for winning more games. This is to keep your agent pool to 1 or 2 characters. This might sound a bit uninteresting to some of you since it could be a bit boring to play the same agents over and over again, but we'd like to reiterate that this is strictly for increasing your win rate. Valorant has a ton of different agents, abilities, and maps that everyone must learn in order to get better at the game. Learning how to play multiple agents at once may cause your practice to be inefficient, since you'll be spending a large amount of time relearning basic agent fundamentals rather than focusing that time on other aspects you'll have to learn later down the line. You ideally want to maximize your time by continuously building on your experiences, and this is harder to achieve when swapping agents, because you need to be in completely different situations entirely. Picking your favorite agents every game is also beneficial with how the current agent select process is in Valorant. This is because Valorant currently uses blind pick as their main format for ranked. If you're unfamiliar with this term, blind pick just refers to how neither team sees what agents are being selected on the enemy team. Also, with this blind pick format, there's no draft phase where both teams are able to ban and pick agents in an orderly fashion. This format is much more common in other games, such as League, Dota, and Rainbow Six Siege. With no access to agent bans and the ability for both teams to have the same agents, this incentivizes players to specialize in 1 or 2 agents, since they're almost guaranteed those characters every game, as long as they insta-lock. I know this may not be the most liked tip, but I truly think that insta-locking what you're comfortable with will lead to long-term success, unless they change the agent select format to counter this. Playing the fill role to find success may work for some, but in general is not the most efficient way to win more games. This is because if you truly look at all of your ranked games, the common denominator in all of them is you. You will have different teammates pretty much every game. So why not make the only consistent factor in your ranked games the best it can? When you spend so much of your time on 1 or 2 select agents, you'll also find nice gimmick plays that may catch your opponents off guard, resulting in a free round win. Sometimes 1 round is all that's needed to snowball an entire game, especially in ranked. Some examples include Sova double shock dart lineups, Viper lurk setups, or Jet one-way smokes. Speaking of Viper lurk setups, in one of our videos where we discuss what we learned from one of the Radiant coaches, he shows us a strong set play to quickly run up mid with a layered wall and smoke setup. Here's a perfect clip from that video showcasing its strength in action.
Spike down, attacker spawn.
Some of these plays shouldn't always be relied on for every round, but they are great ways to add some variety to keep the enemies guessing at all times. A common issue that many players face is a lack of awareness, specifically revolving around the enemy's resources. The way we counter this is by implementing the rule of always looking at the scoreboard during the buy phase. This is due to the abundance of information given by just pressing the tab button. Okay, let's take a moment to break down what's being shown to us when we do open the scoreboard. In the first column, we can see the agents for both teams. Knowing which agents are on your team or on the enemy team has a huge effect on the decisions you have to make throughout a game. An easy example of this is, do we have a Skye or a Sage on our team? If so, maybe instead of pushing forward after being wounded in a duel to find a pick, we can just choose to fall back to our Skye or Sage to get fully healed before taking another fight. But what might be even more important than that is what agents the enemies have. Depending on their comp, they may have different answers or even counters to options you may choose during the round. This was quite apparent when KO was introduced to Valorant. If you're a fan of Valorant esports, you'd probably know that Sova has an incredibly high pick rate on almost all of the maps. This is due to his drone and recon being perfect ways to gain information for relatively low risk. But KO's signature ability, 0 Point, disables the agent's abilities, even if they've already activated it. So if KO's in the right position, once he hears the Sova drone, he can cancel the 400 credit ability with just one free knife. This is a situation that the Sova must take into account before deciding when or where to use his drone. He's forced to think, is the KO here or is his 0 Point on cooldown? Having more context to how the enemy may counter your options and having a game plan surrounding it is how you make sure you are never unprepared. As we move to the right of the names, the next column displays the ultimate points of all the agents. This is quite useful at gauging what type of plan you can use to go into the next round. Maybe you have a Killjoy or a Breach ultimate, which helps in setting up an easy take onto smaller bomb sites. Or your Sage has res, so you can try to isolate duels where your teammates die in relatively safe positions to secure a res. Most players understand this concept to a certain degree, but they fail to use this same idea on what ults the enemies have. Depending on what ults they have, you might need to readjust so you don't fall for their trap. A frequent tactic that many Razes choose to do when they have ult on buy is to double satchel down short A with their ult to punish any enemies that clump up near the barrier. This can be easily circumvented by just looking at the scoreboard and seeing that the Raze has her ultimate during the buy phase. With the knowledge of her ult being ready, we can position slightly further back just in case she does choose to rush down with her ultimate. You may see insane clips of your favorite streamers killing enemy jets who are going for TikTok double updraft kills, but most of the time, they had an educated guess that those plays may be incoming based on the jet having ultimate at the beginning of the round. As we move all the way to the right of the scoreboard, we see the column that displays how many credits the enemies have. This is a direct indicator of what type of guns the opponents may have for that round. Let's say we press tab, and we see they have low economy, or roughly 2,000 credits per player. It's safe to assume they'll likely either save with pistols, or force with cheaper guns such as the Stinger or Bucky. In cases like these, knowing that they're on cheaper weapons may encourage you to play at farther ranges to abuse the fact that many of the cheaper weapons lack the range to fight with rifles. But what about a situation where we see that some of the enemies have roughly 5,000 credits? This is where the potential threat of an op has to be considered. If the enemy has the resources to buy an op, you should try to play around it unless they show you they don't have one on their team. One of the worst feelings in the world is taking an early duel as soon as the barriers go down, only to be met with an op shot to the body, and know you have to wait for the entire round to be played out without you. The very first step to avoiding this scenario is by looking at their credits before every round. If you know they could have an op, you can implement countermeasures for this by jiggling or jump peeking angles, or by using utilities such as a Sova drone or a flash to force them off an angle. Just reading a couple pixels on the scoreboard during the buy phase can completely change the outcome of a round by shining a light on what resources are in play and how that can influence people's gameplay. At the end of the day, Valorant is a team game, which requires you to have some level of teamwork to win. But in Ranked, your ability to work with your team is less of a two-way street, where you and your teammate are perfectly in sync. It's more adapting yourself to your teammates' individual plays so it becomes teamwork. This is perfectly encapsulated by the rule of watch what's not being watched. And what we mean by this is pay attention to what angles or positions your teammates are actively looking towards, then making sure you're looking at other angles which could be a threat to your teammate as they're moving in. Just to give an example, let's move on to A site on Ascent. We have two attackers who plan to enter into A site from A main. The first player walks out of A main while focusing his crosshair placement for a player that may be playing near switch, since this is a common one and done angle. As the second player, you want to watch the next threatful angle that cannot be watched by your first teammate since they're looking left. This would be the close right angles near the Tetris-esque box. These are a huge threat to your teammate since his back is fully exposed to these positions. As you can see, having two sets of eyes really helps in these situations when you choose to look at where your teammates aren't able to cover. This concept can even apply to the third or fourth attacker in the entry pack. If your first and second attacker in are watching the close left and right angles, which angles are they not looking at but are exposed to? That is, any of the angles from on the bomb site itself, since they can shoot one of the first two players in the side of the head while they have to look completely left or right. Since this is the case, If you're the third or fourth attacker behind the injuries, it's ideal to follow the same principle of watch what's not being watched. This would consist of one of the backline attackers to stay in A main and hold for any peeks from sight or heaven, since you want to make sure your teammates can't be shot in the side of the head as they run in. Obviously, not everyone in your team will know what angles they're supposed to clear, depending on what role they have, but it's still in your best interest to be aware what angles they're clearing and choosing to cover their sides or backs so you can have some semblance of teamwork in your ranked games. This concept's also used when retaking a bomb site as a defender. A nice feature that Valorant has that aids in raising your awareness around what angles your teammates are holding are the vision cones on the minimap. If for some reason you don't see these, all you have to do is go into your settings and under the general tab in the map section, enable the minimap vision cones. Once enabled, your teammates' icons on the minimap will be paired with cones that display which angles they currently have in their field of view. If you feel a bit lost on what to watch, use your minimap to get a better picture on where your teammates are looking. One of the most important details to consistently raising your win rate in your ranked games is to keep your teammates tilting to a minimum if possible. We can do this by making sure our communication is primarily callouts and devoid of any potential tilt fuel for our teammates. This is done by crafting our comms using a format. First, call out how many enemies or what agents you see, then say the position of where they're located. 1. A main, or Reyna catwalk are good examples. And don't be afraid to add in how much damage you've done to them as well, if you feel that information may be crucial to your team. The key factor here when using this template to communicate is that you do not, under any circumstances, make a call out you aren't 100% sure about. This may not seem like a big deal because most of the time, your callouts may usually be right. The problem though is when the callout may be wrong that one time and it causes a catastrophic miscommunication for your team, causing them to lose a round. Situations like these can easily create tension between teammates, causing the morale of your entire team to fall based on just one comm. Another benefit of using a simple format for communication is that you aren't adding any unnecessary bloat into your teammates' ears. With ranked and especially solo queue, you'll be paired with completely different teammates almost every game. And with differing personalities, something you may say that you feel is quite innocuous could be the spark that causes one of your other teammates to play worse. Our goal with communication is to have no less and no more than what is required from our teammates. Even if your teammates aren't communicating as much as yourself, it's still beneficial to practice proper communication etiquette for the greater good of the team. You may feel like you're alone on an island whenever no one's calling out anything, but understand that the effort you put into your comms is making your teammates play better, even if sometimes it doesn't look like it. Hopefully, with these 4 rules, you'll have some goals to work on for your upcoming ranked matches.
How much have you ranked up since using SkillCapped?
That would be 5 times now.
I placed Iron 1 on my first act.
And what rank are you now?
Gold 1.
So I jumped from Silver 2 up to Plat 1 within 2-3 acts maybe.
What's your favorite part of the website?
I absolutely love the Smurf commentaries.
Agent courses and the Game Sense ones.
I think the agent guides.
What was your favorite agent guide?
I think the Jet one. I think it went more in depth on everything.
Is there anything that SkillCapped helped you learn that you think would have taken longer otherwise?
I think my whole aiming situation.
Like how to use the agent abilities, like the util. Before this, I was just throwing random shit. Let's say Sova, I would just drone random areas.
I didn't know about the audio cue when it comes to reload switching. Like if you hit reload and then quickly pull out your knife and switch back to your gun, the enemies will get the full audio cue, but you have your gun out.
You've come from, what was your original rank?
Bronze 1.
Bronze 1, and you're already up to Immortal, so that's really freaking cool.
Yeah.